Hey guys, the Analog Archivist here once again with another VHS review, and today we are going to be talking about a movie called Slashed Dreams. This was released by Academy Entertainment in 1986 in this clamshell here. Had this been released a year earlier by Academy, it would have been in this glorious big box with this artwork. It would have been awesome, right? This movie isn't that obscure. It has over 300 votes on IMDb, and it has over 20 user reviews. So it's not that obscure at all. But I decided to review it anyway because it's marketed as a slasher film. And it still doesn't have any real legitimate DVD or Blu-ray release out there. The original title of this movie is Sunburst, and it was made in 1975, way before the slasher boom. So in the mid-80s, when a lot of distributors were looking for content to put on the shelves of video stores, they started to scurry around. They started putting ads in a lot of trade magazines, asking for content, anything. They were just so desperate for it. And this popped up at one point, and they tried to determine how they would sell this. I guess they thought, hey, slasher films are big. We did well on a few slasher films. Why don't we market it as a slasher film? So they gave it this slasher-esque cover art, and they changed the title Slashed Dreams. A lot of people think that this title is used to exploit the fact that Robert Englund is in this. If they were truly trying to exploit the fact that Robert Englund was in this movie, his name would be plastered on here. It would say, featuring Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger. But yeah, I just love the marketing for this movie. It's very slasher-esque. You got the title with the word slashed in it, and it's a very mean-spirited title. Slashed Dreams. I love it. So let's read the back of this and see exactly what it says about this movie. The young lovers frolic naked in the sparkling pond, while foul sweat rolls down the face of the forest freak. He's watching. He has a knife, and he is about to slash into their dreams. Looking back in time, Jenny and Robert's love blossoms when they go backpacking on Silver Pond. Despite warnings about the dangers they may find, the lovers prefer to pack their granola and be on their way. Day 1. A bear invades their campsite, destroying their supplies, but leaving them unharmed. Day 2. In the midst of nature's beauty, they find an isolated cabin and settle in to enjoy the night. But now, he's found them. They're helpless, and the terror begins. So, I don't think there's any real blatant lie on here, except that there's actually two people in this movie, two bad guys, two villains, not just the one that's suggested on the back. And they really try to sell it as a slasher film, right? There's a stalker in the woods, and he's looking to slash into your dreams. Here's a spoiler for you. There's no slashing in this movie. No one dies. No one dies in this movie. It is not a slasher film, okay? Not even a horror film, but we'll get more into that later. Let's delve into the plot. The film begins with a drama between three college students, Jenny, who's spending a lot of time with her guy friend named Robert, and Marshall, her boyfriend who's jealous over it. Later at a frat party, things get heated, and Jenny threatens to run off with her friend Robert to visit her friend Michael, who lives deep in the woods. Marshall, being the anti-hippie frat boy that he is, despises any mention of the dropout hippie, and tells the two to leave the party to go find the cabin. Jenny and Robert agree and leave. Thinking he's called their bluff, Marshall follows behind until an altercation occurs between the two cars. Jenny breaks up with Marshall on the spot, and her and Robert continue on their journey to find Michael. Their first stop is typical of these sorts of movies, the local convenience store. They ask where they might find Michael's cabin. I'm sure you can guess what happens next. They are warned not to go into the woods. Do they listen? Of course not. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a movie. For the next 15 minutes, we have the couple backpacking through the woods. Interestingly enough, they have their backpacks with them, even though they left the party in a hurry. Were their backpacks already packed and in the car? Who knows? Anyway, we get shots of them frolicking through the high grass, walking up hills, sliding down hills, and hiding in their sleeping bags as a bear eats their food. Eventually, they do find Michael's cabin, although he's not there. Following this, in good old Hicksploitation fashion, they decide to go skinny dipping, the most vulnerable position they could put themselves in. It's obvious what happens next. Creepy hillbillies stumble upon them. Although one of the men is drooling over the thought of being with Jenny, the other man calls out to mention they've only come in peace.
That guy looks like a faggot. Why don't you ask him if he wants to kiss you? Shut up, Dank. He's getting closer. I bet he grabs her big old tit.
Of course that's what he's going to do. He's going to get some BT. What do you think he's in the water for?
Oh, I'd like to die for her sponge.
You know something? That is all you think about your one-eyed trouser trout. Now, just shut up.
I got to tell her I'm here.
Robert, being the gentleman that he is, directs Jenny to leave the water first while he stays in, which puts her at the mercy of these two creepy men. Fortunately for her, the men take no action. When they get back to the cabin, they realize Michael still hasn't gotten back and decide to chow down on his food without him. Some great friends these two are. After having had sex on the floor of the cabin, the two hillbillies burst through the door. The man with the hat attempts to rape Jenny, while the other holds a knife to Robert's throat. Unable to get it up, the two men trade positions. When the slow hillbilly begins to express his enjoyment of the act, the other guy gets jealous and pulls him off before he could finish. The two then leave the cabin. You'd think at the crack of dawn, Jenny and Robert would leave the cabin and head back to the car. Nope. They hang around the cabin some more. Jenny remains traumatized by last night's events, and Robert just wanders around outside looking bored. Eventually, Michael does return to his cabin, never explaining where he was all night. I was really hoping he was in on the scheme with the other two hillbilly rapists. But of course, I should have figured this film couldn't be that interesting. While Michael tries to give Jenny some pep talk, Robert finds the two failed rapists stumbling around in the woods. He lunges at them with a hatchet, and a pathetic scuffle ensues. Eventually, the two hillbillies run off, and Jenny, Michael, and Robert have a laugh. The film ends with Jenny reading a poem from one of Michael's hippie books, and her and Robert walk off into the sunset. The end. So yeah, guys, as you can tell, not really a slasher film. I think this was inspired maybe by Last House on the Left. There might be a link between him and Wes Craven. Last House on the Left was made in 1972. This was made in 1975. It seems like the 70s really liked rape in movies. I feel like that line was crossed at some point, maybe with Last House on the Left or another film around that period. And then everyone else started to jump on the bandwagon and play with that idea of rape. Of course, the most infamous one is I Spit on Your Grave, or Day of the Woman as it's also called. This feels more like a survival film, and I guess there was some kind of moral tale. Not really sure what it is. Some people in the reviews think that it was trying to tell some hippie message that the simple life is preferred to the structured lifestyle of going to college, having a family and everything. Because in this movie, the character seems to really revere her friend Michael, who dropped out of college to go live a simple life in the woods. For me, I think it's an anti-hippie message. So, because I think a lot of people idealize that lifestyle. I think, especially like the hippie movement with liberals, they idealize everything. They think, the world could be this big happy place, but human nature is against that. The truth and reality of the fact is that life is cruel and it's cold and it's disgusting. So when this girl goes skinny dipping, because she's so naive with her and her friend Robert, they're just gonna frolic in the woods and go skinny dipping and pretend there's no worry in the world. And of course, that's when the hillbillies come out. And then later in the film, she gets raped. So maybe this isn't a perfect world. Maybe living the simple life in the woods isn't great after all. So maybe that's the moral message. I don't know if the director was a hippie or not, or if that is the truth, if it is pro or anti-hippie, but that's kind of what I take from it. The director's name is James Polakof. He made several movies, I think 6 or 7 in the 70s and 80s, and just kind of fell off the map. He did this one. He did a horror film called Demon Rage, which I have here, which I may review at some point, because this is another movie that doesn't have any real legitimate DVD or Blu-ray out there, so this might be worthy of a review, but this came out in 1982. But he also did a bunch of comedies, like teen comedies. Not a bunch, like I said, only like 5 or 6 movies he did all together. But after that point, he kind of fell off, the map, so to speak. But when you look up his name on IMDb, there's a bio for him there, which was written by himself. So at one point, he received a PhD, and now he's writing novels or whatever. And he uploaded a new, profile picture for himself on IMDb. But I find it interesting that he's still active in some capacity. But as the producer of these films, why hasn't he tried to have them released on DVD or like legitimate versions? It might be because he no longer has the original elements. That's the only thing I can imagine, because having these two as like a double feature would be pretty cool. I don't think this one could stand on its own, but between the two of them, I think that would be a pretty cool double feature from this director. But there's no legitimate DVD or Blu-ray releases for these movies, just these really awful budget VHS transfers. So now the film was also written by a guy named James Keach, and he has a prolific career in acting and I think producing and directing. But also in this movie, he plays the rapist with the funny hat. So I find that interesting. So he wrote the movie, and he wrote himself into the movie as the rapist who was impotent. Now much of the cast, Peter Hooton, who played Doctor Strange on TV, and I think Anne Lockhart, a lot of the cast went on to have flourishing careers in acting, which is really unusual for a small film like this, a small amateur film that really went nowhere. I find that very interesting. In fact, it actually has a composer who stars in this film from the golden age of cinema in Hollywood. What's his name? Rudy Vallee. He did a bunch of singing in old classic black and white movies. And in the 70s, something started to happen. There was this overturn in cinema because now we were making room for new and younger Hollywood stars. So a lot of these old classic actors from the golden age of cinema ended up finding themselves in these little bit roles like this. It's kind of sad because these are people with a lot of class during their era. And now they're doing sleazy things like this. Of course, like I said, Robert Englund's in this movie. I don't really think I have to expand on that too much, except to say he plays a good guy in this movie. He normally plays like a villain or a sort of like a mean guy, just because of, I guess, his look and his appearance. But in this, he plays a really happy-go-lucky hippie. He's the hippie friend who made the cabin. It's just not the role that you would normally expect from Robert Englund. Now, I did try to research this movie and see if it was released theatrically, and it actually was. I could only find one really small, low-res picture of the movie poster for this movie, so it did have a theatrical release. Something worth noting about this movie is the music, because when you read so many reviews for this movie, so many people talk about the folk singer. So this movie doesn't really have a score. It has some folk songs sung by this nobody. So I actually researched this woman's name. I didn't write her name down here, but I tried to find out who this woman was. Has she ever recorded anything? The only information I found about her was that she sang in this movie. So she was an unknown then and remains to be an unknown now. It's kind of mysterious to think who she is because she sang the music for this movie and then just sort of disappeared. A lot of the reviews say she's god-awful. It's like nails on her chalkboard. Listen, she's bad, but she's not that bad. It's tolerable.
Animals are clumsy too. That ain't no ballet down at the zoo. Before you let your feet make you feel like a fool, remember animals are clumsy too. Next time you slip on a banana peel, think of a cat caught up in a tree. When you catch your coat in a door, think of a dog on a new Explorer. Animals are clumsy too.
I think the music is just really, really corny. And that's what people have a problem with. Really, really corny, you know, Carole King type music. I'm not saying Carole King is corny, but trying to imitate it does sound corny. And that's pretty much what you get here. So there it is, guys. Slashed Dreams, also known as Sunburst, made in 1975, released on VHS in 1986 from Academy Entertainment. Would I recommend this movie? I think so. I mean, for just casual horror fans, nah, you're not really going to enjoy this. If you are a horror aficionado and you would like to see Robert Englund, that's a reason to see it. I think some of the interest in this movie is the fact that he was in this, but he's only in it for a brief period of time. But it's boring. There's a lot of them walking around the woods and just, you know, there's not much here. Kind of reminds me of Backwoods, the previous movie, or I don't know when I'm going to upload this, but yeah, the other review I did for a movie called Backwoods. It feels a lot like that, but Backwoods is actually more interesting than this. This movie just doesn't have a lot of substance to it. So, yeah, that's it for Slashed Dreams. Has this awesome slasher cover art. It has this awesome slasher name, but it's not a slasher film, unfortunately. So that's the extent of this one. So this has been Paul, the Analog Archivist, with VHScollector.com. Please check out the crowdfunding campaign that we have going on for VHScollector.com. We're rebuilding the website from the ground up. I still have a lot of data to enter into the database there. Now, we did start some work on the website, but if we don't get a lot of the funds in, the website's just gonna, you know, take forever to come together. So please check out the campaign video that I made, and please contribute if you can. Every little bit helps. Again, this has been Paul with VHScollector.com. I will see you guys next time. Thanks.
And in the sweetness of friendship, let there be laughter and sharing of pleasures. For in the dew of little things, the heart finds its morning and is refreshed.